And it's also interesting in those days that the only place you could drill for oil and gas was in the U7 district per charter. Actually, that's still the law, but we've modified it. But we kind of, that's another story. We'll go there today. But in any event, in order to change the U7, it took a citywide vote of the people. Anytime you added the annexed area into the U7 drilling district, U stood for use 7. Right? And so in these citywide elections, like as oil and gas started moving into North Oklahoma City, started moving into Northeast 4th, Northeast 5th, Northeast 6th, into the southern part of Lincoln Terrace, toward the state capitol. These citywide votes, these were highly contested, and some folks did not want oil wells drilled in close proximity to their residential areas. And it was very interesting that the South Oklahoma City precincts would carry these propositions by votes of 10-1. So we probably have oil and gas drilling in northeast Oklahoma City because of the votes of voters in southeast Oklahoma City, and South Oklahoma City, and Capitol Hill, because those were the oil field workers and wanted to work on the jobs. So, okay, next reason for this separation. Why is there this sense of separation? Well, Capitol Hill developed a thriving commercial district right where we are, and that thriving commercial district, retail district, it existed into the 1960s. So you had your own downtown. If you grew up in the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, even into the 60s, you had your own downtown, and it's right where we are. They had John A. Brown's, which in time became Dillard's, and John A. Brown's was fabulous, as those of us remember John A. Brown's. It had a big Brown store here. Technically, the John A. Brown store closed in Capitol Hill and moved to Crossroads, but then it quickly became Dillard's, and in time they left downtown too. But you had J.C. Penney's, you had other stores, you had a multi-level parking garage, of course still here. I mean, you know you've got a lot of retail activity where you have to have a parking garage to park people. I mean, that says something about the intensity. Incidentally, we need another parking garage. I had a heck of a job finding a parking space. I drove around and around and around. Anyway, which is all good. And I have a friend who doesn't live here anymore, but when she did, she confided in me. She said, I was 14 years old before I realized there was a whole nother downtown shopping area north of the river. She grew up in Capitol Hill. We just didn't go there. And on Saturdays, it was a big deal to come down to Commerce Street, and we'd have lunch. It was just a wonderful deal. I mean, I knew there were tall buildings downtown, but that's not where we didn't go to Brown's down there. We went to Brown's here. We didn't go down there. And then the final point of the 6 points is the sense of separation. And I actually got this from a meeting kind of like the session we're having today. I've learned things that people have told me after meetings or during meetings, and they reminded me of the intensity of north-south sports rivalries in Oklahoma City. And for many, many years, there was one high school south, and that was Capitol Hill. And there were 4 high schools north. There was Douglas, there was Classen, there was Northeast, and there was Central. Well, everyone in South Oklahoma City, you were all for Capitol Hill. But in North Oklahoma City, well, your alliances and allegiances were broken up into the 4 separate schools. And further, Capitol Hill went through an era where they just dominated, particularly in football. And they turned out, in baseball, they turned out people who went to the major leagues. And it was just, so there was a lot of South Oklahoma City pride and in that. And a desire not to be identified with North Oklahoma City, but by gosh, I'm identified with Capitol Hill. Capitol High School, Capitol Hill area of Oklahoma City, the old town of Capitol Hill. I mean, the Chamber of Commerce was called the Capitol Hill Chamber of Commerce in those days, not the South Oklahoma City Chamber of Commerce. So north-south sports rivalries were important. So those are the six potential factors. Now, all that said, let's talk a little bit about Oklahoma City today. And there's this, there's much less of a sense of separation now than there was when I started giving this talk 15 years ago, in my opinion. And Pete, you may have another view on that. Think about that. Let's get toward the end. Particularly in the area we're located in now, the river which once separated us, the river is bringing us together, I think, in a good way. We've got to get some things happening on the south side of the river, in addition to the north side of the river, but we're going that way. Meg, I can't help. I'm sorry. I lived in South Oklahoma City for 26 years, and I've loved every single minute of it. But there's this special sense of community in South Oklahoma City. If you live in South Oklahoma City, you know what I'm talking about, and if you don't, you'd have to move. You'd have to live here for a while. But it's a real special sense of community. It's the kind of sense of community that exists in neighborhoods in North Oklahoma City. You feel that way about your neighborhood, but in South Oklahoma City, there's this sense you're a part of something special. J.W. Mashburn and I were in Las Vegas 30 years ago. Olympic gold medal winner, lives in South Oklahoma City. And we were talking to these folks we met. Where are you guys from? He said, well, I'm from South Oklahoma City. So he's like talking to people in Las Vegas. Well, I'm from South Oklahoma City. That's that special sense of community. And some examples of this special sense of community that causes this sense of community to go on is, 40 years ago, Oklahoma City Community College was founded. That was actually the South Oklahoma City Junior College at the time. But what's interesting about that was that in order for this to happen, that citizens went door to door with a petition asking for the creation of a special taxing district to tax themselves in order to have a junior college in South Oklahoma City. And then there was a district-wide vote, going as far south as 89th Street, to impose this tax, and that's how Oklahoma City Community College was started. And that tax still exists and pays for a portion of the cost of Oklahoma City Community College. That's a real sense of community when that happens. Integra Southwest Medical Center. That started in 1963 with a fundraising campaign in the Capitol Hill High School field house, attended by 800 people, and they went and raised all kinds of money. That was Hill-Burton money, community hospital money of the 1960s under the Hill-Burton Act, and you had to have a certain amount of local money. They went and raised it at the Capitol Hill field house, 800 people present, to create what's now Integra Southwest Medical Center. It was both of those things are illustrations of this ongoing sense of community, and that ongoing sense of community, that's something that could serve. It could serve all of Oklahoma City very well. It continues to serve South Oklahoma City well. It could particularly serve Old Capitol Hill well, and I'm coming to the end. It could particularly serve Commerce Street in this district well. This is a really unique history of Capitol Hill. There aren't other areas of Oklahoma City that I know of that have this kind of unique history. I mean, we annexed the town of Britain, I know that, and frankly some other places we maybe annexed and maybe didn't, but we don't even remember anymore. But this is a really unique history, and there were people like this concept that this was folks' retail district. That's where they went. There was an affinity for this place. There is an affinity for this place from prior generations. Also, this was once very much a melting pot. If you talk to Jewish families, if you'll read back, you'll learn about their history. You'll trace their grandparents back to a business here in Capitol Hill, and they perhaps lived upstairs. And the Greek community, you'll trace them back here. And of course, the Hispanic community now. There's this wonderful, rich focus of the Hispanic community. Well, that's my story. Thank you. see,
I'm going to assume we have questions.
yeah, now, this sort of thing happens. Was just shared with me, when she was growing up, 2 Lebanese families had businesses in
I would come and shop all the way from Nichols Hills to shop with them.
Right here.
Was it in this building? I know there was Cecil's forever, and then there was Jack and Jill. And I talked to Joy, I talked to Joy once a week. Yeah, the Apple
The
family.
sign, Jack and Jill sign is still on the back of the store.
Oh, is it really? Yeah. I even have a doll from that store still in my, at my house. And I mean, we came from Nichols Hills to come to their stores, because they were family, you know, family friends.
Well, yeah.
When did this area become Hispanic as we think of it now?
I'm going to let someone else in the room answer that question. And it's an ongoing process. Someone else please answer that more authoritatively than myself.
Pete, would you be able to shed some light on that?
The question was, when did this area become Hispanic?
It's been a transition since, probably starts back when Central High School closed, back in the 60s, when Central, or late 50s, when Central High School closed.
1960.
And has moved, it's just been very progressive incrementally over the last 50 years. Wasn't just a one-time event, it's just a very progressive. I think it speaks to something John said earlier, and that is most people don't recognize the diversity that 25th Street, Commerce Street held in the past. I mean, there were stores, retail stores owned by Jewish families. The most prominent lawyer on the street was a Jewish lawyer. The Lebanese buildings, the businesses we're talking about, this was one. So I think that acceptance of diversity made it very easy for this to become, to transition into a more heavily Hispanic area. You know, prior to the closing of Central High School, most of the Hispanic children went to schools north, they went to Central. When they closed Central High School, most of the Hispanics came to Capitol Hill because we were the closest school here. So I think it started, I really do think it began with, and that's just my own, kind of an opinion, like John said, but I think it really began with the closing of Central High School.
Did Little Flower Catholic Church play a role in that?
It did. It's made the community much more accepting, I think. But I think that acceptance was already built in. As a kid growing up, I mean, I bought jeans at Levine's, and you know that my folks, when they needed a lawyer, they went to see Herman Mercer. I mean, and so this community really has always been very accepting of diversity, and I think that it made it easy for it to happen. It's happened much more seamlessly here, I think, than it has in, say, other areas.
We had our fair share of Native Americans also
Okay,
growing up.
good.
I grew up 3 blocks from.
Very good. Well, talk to us.
And share your name for the video real quick.
It was, I didn't think of it as being a blue collar area necessarily, because when I graduated from high school, we had doctors and lawyers, the Mercers, of course, and I think that they continued to stay on this side of town, and the Levines. The Shadeds that owned it, a couple of them, I think, became doctors or dentists, and they stayed on this side of town. And it was a good time to be growing up, and it was great to be able to just walk 3 blocks and be up here with 3 movie theaters.
Yeah.
3.
And what were the names of those theaters?
Redskins.
Redskins?
No. The Redskins on 29th Street.
You're right, Redskins on 29th.
Right.
The Capitol,
Nob Hill, Yale, Capitol.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, let's get it straight.
Nob Hill was right down the street where the Opry is.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
Yale's down the street where this
Yep.
cesspool is.
Yep.
And
The Capitol.
and the Capitol was on Robinson, just about a half a block south of 25th Street.
South.
On the
Then-
west side, east side of the street.
Okay, on Commerce, and then the Redskins down on 29th,
29th and west.
which is close too. You had 4 theaters.
Yes.
Lucky.
Yeah.
Yes.
What family owned those theaters? Carlin, the Greek.
Wasn't the Ferris?
Could be, well, that's Lebanese.
Well, they were Bartons. The Barton
It
family.
could have been the
Bartons.
Ferris or the Chambors.
No, the Bartons owned the
or-
Nabil.
That's a good question. Yeah, who owned the theaters? That's it.
In the city, it would be Ferris's, Chambors, so I'm wondering if they owned it in here. The Joneses had them in Shawnee, so they could have possibly had them here.
But Barton owned the Nabil.
Barton.
The
Okay.
Chambors did,
Okay,
yeah, I
Chambers
figured
on the
they
Yale.
might
Okay,
have some
very good.
theaters.
What year did you graduate from high school?
61.
61. Very well.
That was a very good year.
I did.
We had 636 in our graduating class, and I think without set a record, I think we tapered off from that point on. But that was kind of the end of the good times for Capitol Hill.
Did your football team win the state championship?
Quite a few of them in the 50s
Mhm.
and the 60s, yes, under C.D. Spiegel.
Yep, yep,
And,
yep,
yes, and the choir
yep.
was incredible and took many awards in
Yes.
state contests.
Yes,
And the band was so excellent
yep.
and took many awards. I mean, Capitol Hill shone in those years. They really did.
Do you remember Whopper T? Dr. Bob Todd?
I'm sorry.
Dr. Bob Todd, Dr. Robert Todd, the late president of Oklahoma City Community College?
I'm not familiar.
Okay. He was a 59 graduate. His football name was Whopper T.
One of the things that people ought to look at if they get a chance is the MAPS restoration of Capitol Hill High School restored the old auditorium in the high school. And it is back to what it looked like in the 30s now.
Really?
In fact,
Yeah.
I was with, JW and I went to look at it one time, and he did not remember it like it is now. It had all, some of the really neat features of the auditorium had been walled off, and when they were doing the restoration, we pulled all that stuff off and put some extra money into it, and it's really, really, really a nice, it can be used as a performing art facility again. It's really a good job.
I'm going to mention too, you're talking about Capitol Hill Pride. There's a Capitol Hill, it's a very complicated thing. Capitol Hill Athletics and Activities Association, and I'm not sure what they've decided to rename it, but it's been going on for at least 20 years that I know of. And they meet once a year, they have a banquet at the Cowboy Hall of Fame. And they will present an award to like 5 or 6 graduates who've gone on to do bigger and better things. But the attendance last year was 600. Wow. And some of those people are a lot older than I am. It's kind of, each time we go, it's like, who's going to be able to show up? But it's true. That's part of the pride of the area.
Very good.
Let me add another comment to that Capitol Hill Pride thing. There's a couple of things I use as an illustration when I talk about it. I appreciate using the word community because I've always felt like it's not a street, it's not an old town, it's a community. And the best illustration I can think of is this large church that's across the street to the east was Capitol Hill Baptist Church. It was by far the largest church in South Oklahoma City. When they decided to rebuild and move, they moved to 134th and Southwestern, and they didn't name it the 134th and Southwestern Baptist Church. They kept the name Capitol Hill Baptist Church, and they're 134th and Western. So when Capitol Hill Florist moved off of Robinson, it was at between 24th and 25th on Robinson, and they moved very far south, a couple of locations south. They didn't change their name; they're still Capitol Hill Florist Company. You can see that all over South Oklahoma City, way out of where the original locations were. They kept the name Capitol Hill, and it is not because in reverence to this location, it's in respect to this community. This community has always been Capitol Hill. There's a big picture of Allie Reynolds, Capitol Hill High School football player, who's a Native American, founder of Red Earth.
Yep.
He was a Capitol Hill guy. Went to high school at Capitol Hill and pitched for the Yankees. Big chief.
Siobhan Dakin.
Yeah. Yeah, he was. He was hurt his knee. Would have been a real great quarterback over you. He hurt his knee first year down. John, you mentioned the Kessler plan.
Yeah.
Is that any relation to the Kessler that served on the council?
No.
Anywhere else?
No, that was Judge Kessler, wasn't it?
Well, he was a councilman, then he
Yeah,
became
yeah,
a
yeah.
judge.
Yeah, no, it was not. Well, Kessler was a, that was a national urban planning firm.
Another thought I had when we were talking about the plat, there is a copy of a very, very early plat of Capitol Hill on the wall in the room, in the building next to
Okay.
the other half of the building. There's a copy of that plat that's hanging on the wall there.
I'm gonna look at it when I go out.
I think isn't that just a College Hills edition?
It could be, but it's a very old
Okay.
plat.
My family's.
Yeah, College Hill is the next subdivision
Right.
west, right? Yeah. Yeah.
I had a question
Yes.
about the first Oklahoma City Zoo
Yeah,
along the river.
Yes.
Was it Capitol Hill or was it?
it was in Oklahoma City, and that's, it's where Wheeler Park is now on the north side of the river at,
on the north.
on the north side at Western and the river. Be the northeast corner of the river and Western. And the flood of 23 drowned the animals.
Yeah.
And it was then relocated to Lincoln Park in 23. The flood of 23 caused that, that's right.
John, someone asked about the Hispanic influence here. The Little Flower Catholic Church is actually, that land is owned by the Mexican Archdiocese, not the Oklahoma.
Really, really,
We tried to do that when we were,
Yeah.
tried to get permission from doing that when we were doing the new NSO building
yeah.
down there. We found that out. We were not dealing with this Oklahoma Archdiocese, it was Mexico.
Was that one of the earliest churches?
I think it was, I think the one downtown, the St. Joseph is probably the oldest one.
Yes,
As folks are thinking about how you weave together that history and the nostalgia for the diversity of a community and with the new vibrant Latino community, it's interesting to look at other cities. Milwaukee, the south side of Milwaukee, that had a very similar sort of divided by a river or a valley, north and south, and a very ethnically diverse south side that has now a Latino population. And so it would just be interesting to look at what other cities are doing and how they're doing that. And if anybody wanted to do sort of comparative considerations of urban history or urban geography along those lines, that would be a great example.
that's a good idea. And, Milwaukee has done a really good job of, they have all these festivals that just work, and there's just a lot of them. And they're, like if there's a Greek festival, well, it's very Greek. It's important for a Greek festival to be very Greek, but it's not just Greeks who go to it. I mean, because you want the whole community to come, and that makes it bigger and more vibrant and more financially successful. You know who's quite knowledgeable on festivals in Milwaukee? Is another John Williams, John D. Williams, that I could put you in touch with. He was the president of the umbrella organization that coordinated these festivals. Before we leave, I'll give you his phone number. His contacts.
Thank you.
Flower festivals when I was talking.
Did you? Oh.
Yeah, my brother would be from C. Program director.
Oh, yeah.
And then he would, Joseph, he would add everything.
There's another comment out here.
Enjoyed it.
You were very good.
Thank you.
And I hope I didn't have
Time to
to
bring
to sit.